The drama begins with Zhuang Rui, a handsome young man, but he's poor and very shy. He finds it difficult to talk to girls because he wears glasses due to weak eyesight. One evening, while out with his friends, he suddenly remembers that he left his phone at the store where he works. He decides to go back to the store. While there, 3 masked burglars enter, intending to steal the store's valuable antiques. Unaware that anyone is inside, Zhuang Rui senses their presence and in an act of bravery, decides to them off. He manages to break their bones, disarm them, and ultimately kill all 3. Encouraged by his actions, he plans to continue fighting, but as soon as he steps out, his leg gives way and he collapses. The burglars notice him and severely beat him. He tries to escape, but broken glass cuts into his eyes and he falls unconscious. The burglars, terrified by what happened, assume he's dead and flee the scene. When Zhuang Rui wakes up, he finds himself in a hospital as he leaves his room to go to the bathroom. When he passes, looks at him in astonishment. Confused, he doesn't understand why they are staring. Once in the bathroom, he looks in the mirror and sees that his eyes are covered by a white bandage. Shocked, he realizes he can still see everything even though his eyes are bandaged. Moreover, when he focuses his gaze, he can see things behind walls. Frightened, he doesn't know what has happened to him as he's always had weak eyesight. He returns to his room, removes the bandage and puts on his glasses, but realizes he can no longer see through them. Frustrated, he takes them off. A doctor comes to examine his condition, but when Zhuang Rui looks at him, his eyes turn golden and he can see through the doctor's mask. He even notices a pimple on the doctor's face. Shocked, he asks the doctor to remove the mask to confirm what he saw, and when the doctor does, Tasha, it's all true and not a hallucination. Deeply puzzled by his newfound ability, he doesn't know what to make of it. Later, a police officer arrives to investigate what happened. She gives to Sean an apple and using his enhanced vision, he realizes the apple is rotten inside. The officer becomes suspicious of Zhuang Rui, thinking he might have been involved with the burglars as they left him alive. He insists that he's innocent. After leaving the hospital, Zhuang Rui goes to his boss at store. To his surprise, his boss gives him his last month's paycheck and informs him that he's fired. Zhuang Rui returns home and sits with his friends, worrying about how to repay his debts. One of his friends shows him a statue, claiming it's an ancient artifact worth $1,000. Zhuang Rui touches the statue, using his powers to discover it's a fake. His friends don't believe him and take the statue to a market that deals in antiques. The shop owner tells them the statue is worth no more than $5 and Zhuang Rui's friend Zhuang Rui was right. While Zhuang Rui is at the shop, he uses his golden eyes to examine another statue the shop owner has. He discovers that it's a rare piece, but it's covered in dust. Curious, Sean asks the price and the shop owner offers to sell it for $100 too. Sean buys it, but his friend gets angry thinking he's been cheated. Soon after, a wealthy collector who deals in rare items sees Sean holding the statue and offers him $1,000 for it. Zhuang Rui refuses, saying it's not for sale. Then a man with expert knowledge of antiques arrives. He looks at the artwork and says, "I'll give you $10,000 for it." Everyone is shocked. Then the expert cleans the sculpture and its color changes to red, revealing that it's a rare tree. They are amazed that the protagonist identified this just from a glance. Another man offers him $20,000 and he agrees. The protagonist is overjoyed because he can finally pay off his debts. He and his friend return home, operating their sale by ordering a lot of food. The protagonist then decides to use his golden eyes to become wealthy. The next day, he goes with his friends to different stores in search of valuable historical items using his power. At one store, he spots a rare tree and asks the shopkeeper how much it costs. The shopkeeper says it's $5,000, but his friend refuses, saying it's too expensive. However, the protagonist says, "Trust me, if we sell it at auction, we can get $50,000. They agree to buy it. Later, they take it to an expert in antiques to have it appraised. However, this time the expert says this one is different. Part of it is antique, but part of it is fake. If you sell it, it won't be worth more than $500. The protagonist is shocked and learns a valuable lesson, not to rely solely on his powers, but to also gain knowledge about antiques. When he gets home, he buys books on ancient artifacts and starts reading, determined to learn more about them. A few days later, the expert calls protagonist and tells him about a place where they are selling ancient artifacts. He invites him to come and test his new knowledge, advising him to just observe and not buy anything to avoid regret. The protagonist is excited and agrees to go with his friend. At the market, they see many valuable and ancient items. The protagonist also spots a small sculpture that no one is interested in as they believe it's fake. However, the protagonist senses something special about it. The price of the sculpture is $12,000, but he only has $5,000. He starts negotiating and the crowd around him laughs, but a businessman at the market is impressed by the protagonist's persistence and sells him the artwork. The businessman becomes curious about why the protagonist wants the sculpture so badly, so the protagonist takes it to the expert. After examining it closely, the expert reveals that it was created by a famous 19th century artist, but the artwork itself is a copy. However, the protagonist insists that the way the pieces are connected is unusual. The expert eventually agrees and takes a closer look. He discovers that the sculpture is actually made of 3 original artworks, cleverly stacked like a sandwich, with the top part protecting the authentic piece underneath. The businessman is astonished and offers 15 million for the sculpture, but the protagonist refuses, suspecting that the artwork is worth even more. He negotiates, saying, "I'll sell it to you for 5 million because without your help I wouldn't have bought the sculpture." The businessman thanks him and gives him the 5 million, telling him to call anytime he needs something. The expert also admires the protagonist because he's not just after money, he's an honest man. The expert then tells him that he's reminded of a legendary hero who had magical eyes, and he advises the protagonist to use his eyes for good. The protagonist returns home and his friend can hardly believe what happened, especially now that they have so much money. The protagonist buys everything. Meanwhile, he continues reading his books, eager to gain more knowledge and experience. Then a message arrives from his friend, inviting him to attend his wedding. He decides to go, taking his money along for safekeeping at his friend's house. The next day, he travels to the city where the wedding will take place. While there, he learns that a group of archaeologists specializing in artifacts and scientists in the desert. He decides to visit them before the wedding starts. When he arrives, he finds out they are searching for a royal, and he offers to help. However, he encounters a soldier who is conducting an investigation, and is there to protect the site from thieves. She becomes suspicious of the protagonist, and decides to watch him closely, wondering if he is after the tomb. The protagonist continues into the desert, and notices that the sand feels different, softer than usual. He decides to use his powers, and discovers that the tomb is hidden beneath the sand. He informs the archaeologists, who are amazed at how he figured it out so easily. As they have been searching for a week without success, impressed by his abilities, they invite him to join their team. However, a group of bandits who had previously raided a store are also at the site, planning to steal from the tomb. That evening, the protagonist goes out to have dinner with the soldier, but while walking, the bandits ambush him and cover his face to kidnap him using his powers. He sees their faces and notices a tattoo on the neck of one of them. Recognizing them as the same group of bandits at the right moment, the soldier arrives to rescue him, causing the bandits to panic and flee. The soldier is surprised that the protagonist saw the bandits without even removing the blindfold, becoming even more suspicious of him. She takes him to the station to identify the bandits, and he recognizes one from the photos. They trace their location, but when they arrive, the place is empty and they find explosives. They realize the bandits plan to blow up the tomb during the wedding so no one will hear the explosion. The bandits soon arrive and detonate the entrance to the. Throwing the artifacts into the pit, the soldier decides to enter the pit, taking the protagonist with her. Though he's nervous, she reassures him saying, "Don't worry, I'll protect you," and they continue together. The protagonist is amazed by the paintings on the walls. They enter another chamber, but the soldier accidentally steps into a dangerous trap. The protagonist quickly realizes the danger and grabs her before she falls, saving her. Suddenly they are attacked from all sides as knives fall from above. But the protagonist manages to avoid them. The soldier thanks him for saving her life. However, they are pursued by the bandits. One of the archaeologists accidentally touches a stone, causing another pit to open. The soldier and the protagonist fall into it, finding themselves trapped underground. They are surrounded by ancient statues with no way out. The soldier begins to panic because she's afraid of confined spaces, and the statues start spewing sand from their mouths. They realize that if they don't escape quickly, they will die. The protagonist uses his powers to locate a possible escape route and starts digging a tunnel. Soon a new door opens and the entire team rushes inside. They find a chamber full of ancient relics, but unexpectedly, the protagonist comes across the skeleton of a person who had died 1,000 years ago. He also discovers that he is the first person to possess golden eyes. Moreover, he finds his diary, but the people present think it's all a fabrication, leaving it to be a fictional story. However, the protagonist knows that the story is true. He decides to take the diary, but suddenly they hear a sound. The protagonist uses his powers and realizes that it's an explosion planned by the bandits. Just as he is about to warn the others, the explosion goes off and they are all thrown to the ground. The bandits manage to escape, having taken what they wanted. The soldier regains consciousness and checks if the protagonist is okay before chasing after the bandits. She catches up with but he pretends to be one of the wedding guests. The soldier notices a tattoo on his neck and recognizes him. The bandit then grabs a wedding guest and threatens to kill them. At that moment, the protagonist arrives and uses his powers to realize that the gun is unloaded. He tells the bandit to release the hostage and take him instead. The bandit agrees and lets the hostage go, but the protagonist is unafraid and tells him, "Go ahead, shoot me." The bandit pulls the trigger but discovers the gun is empty. The leader of the plan is about to fail, decides to kill his comrade to avoid compromising the mission. A bomb is strapped to the bandit's bag and the leader plans to detonate it. The protagonist senses the explosion coming and grabs the soldier, jumping far away just before the bomb goes off. The soldier is amazed at what just happened. Admiring his bravery, she goes back to capture the bandit only to find him dead from the explosion. The protagonist returns to the city and asks the leader of the group to give him the diary he found in there. Grateful for all he had done, she agrees and gives it to him. The protagonist starts reading the diary and begins practicing the techniques written inside. He discovers that he can now see 2 meters ahead of him and can freeze anything in order to examine it. His powers continue to grow. He then returns home feeling happy, but finds his friend crying. His friend tells him that he broke something valuable in the market and lost all his money. The protagonist tells him to calm down, assuring him that the money will come and go, and he promises that they will make even more than Zhuang Rui realized the vase is fake and doesn't deserve such huge money. Then when he realizes that it's fake and does not deserve that money, the next day he and his friend go to the man who's robbed them with this fake items. Then Zhuang Rui makes a bet with the shopkeeper saying he'll bring back a valuable artwork worth 2 million in less than 2 hours. If he fails, he'll give the shopkeeper the same amount of money. The shopkeeper agrees because all the artwork in his store is fake. The bet begins and Titian uses his ability to carefully inspect the art pieces one by one, discovering that all of them are fake. Then a wealthy man enters the store and while the shopkeeper makes tea for him, Zhuang Rui is amazed by the cup the man is using. He realizes it's a rare artifact with only 3 known pieces in the world. The shopkeeper is shocked that the protagonist could recognize it at first glance, which causes him to lose the bet. The wealthy man is impressed by the protagonist and invites him to a special event attended by experts in ancient artifacts. The protagonist is excited and grateful. Later that night, he visits his mentor and asks for advice about the upcoming event. His mentor tells him it will involve the sale of rare gems, including rubies and gold. He advises him to study gold thoroughly so he can distinguish between real and fake to avoid being cheated. The protagonist thanks him and takes his advice seriously. He returns home carrying a large box, and his friend assumes it contains rare artwork, but he finds it's filled with books. The protagonist explains that he needs to read a lot in order to make more money. He stays up all night reading, using his golden eyes to absorb information quickly. His friend wakes up and is shocked that the protagonist has read all the books in such a short time, suspecting he's hiding something. The next day, they go to the event where they see the wealthy man they had encountered in the market earlier. The man insults the protagonist, calling him poor and ignorant about valuable stones. The protagonist challenges him to a bet, saying he'll. As they enter the event, Titian is captivated by a woman selling items and she seems interested in him too, watching him all day. A female officer arrives who happens to be friends with the woman and feels jealous because her friend is attracted to the protagonist. They then meet a businessman who had bought artwork from Titian earlier. He explains how the auction works. It depends on making bets, and the gems are displayed in front of everyone. The person who can correctly identify whether a gem is real or fake wins. The protagonist realizes that if he fails, he could end up in goal because of the debts he owes. The auction begins and a green-colored stone is presented. Everyone tries to increase their bids, believing there's a rare emerald inside it. The protagonist attempts to buy it, but the wealthy man has more money and wins the bid. However, the protagonist doesn't give up. He closely examines the other stones using his golden eyes and finds one that seems suspicious, thinking it might contain a rare emerald. To buy it for 5,000. His businessman friend tries to convince him to buy a different stone, but he refuses. When the stone is brought to the gem expert, he breaks it open, revealing a plain white stone. The wealthy man mocks the protagonist, calling him a novice. But the protagonist doesn't give up and asks the expert to break the stone again. This time, everyone is shocked when a green color emerges from inside. They advise him not to break it again as its value is 100,000, but the protagonist insists on breaking it once more. Everyone is anxious and his friend is amazed by his decision, but the protagonist is confident in his abilities. When it is broken for the second time, they see a rare emerald inside. Everyone present is shocked and people start offering him money until the bid reaches 18 million. The protagonist is thrilled that the 5,000 he spent turned into 18 million. The wealthy man becomes furious and decides to break his stone, confident that it will contain something. Since he spent a lot of money on it, when he breaks it for the first time and sees a green color inside, people offer him 10 million but he refuses, wanting to break it again since he paid 7 million for it. When he breaks it for the second time, a green color appears and it's revealed to be a rare emerald. People offer him 30 million but he refuses due to his greed. The protagonist challenges him to break it a third time just like he did. The wealthy man agrees and everyone in the room grows nervous. The protagonist uses his abilities and realizes there's nothing of value left inside. When the stone is broken for the third time, it reveals a plain white stone of no value. The businessman refuses to buy it and the wealthy man realizes he's been outdone. He leaves angrily while the protagonist celebrates with his friend having become wealthy. The businessman confirms that the protagonist has great potential and offers him a house nearby. The protagonist is overjoyed. The next day, they move into their new home. His friend is thrilled with the new house, but the protagonist remains focused on improving his abilities and becoming even more knowledgeable for future use. Later that night, we see the protagonist reading a book he had taken from the tomb. It's revealed that someone 1,000 years ago used the golden eye's power to accumulate vast wealth, but became obsessed with money, eventually going mad. The power of his eyes overwhelmed him and it consumed his life. The protagonist feels a sense of fear, realizing that he must protect himself from the same fate. The next day, he follows the businessman to learn more and they visit a shop that sells gold. There, the protagonist notices a uniquely shaped necklace and uses his golden eyes to discover it's 1,000 years old. The businessman decides to buy the necklace, believing it will bring him luck. That night, the businessman is home with the necklace when suddenly the lights mysteriously go out. He sees a figure standing behind a curtain and thinks it's a ghost. Terrified, he screams in fear. The protagonist arrives and tells him what happened, explaining that the necklace is cursed and brings misfortune to anyone who owns it. The next day, they go to the shop where they bought the necklace, but the shopkeeper refuses to return all of their money. He offers to refund only half. The wealthy man agrees to return the necklace, but the protagonist becomes suspicious of what really happened. He believes someone tampered with the electricity to scare him. Later, a man approaches them and reveals that over 50 people have been scammed in the same way by the shopkeeper, who uses tricks to deceive customers. The wealthy man becomes furious and threatens to sue the shopkeeper, declaring that no criminal should be allowed to sell anything to people. That night, we see the protagonist walking home, sensing someone following him. Suddenly, he is attacked by a masked man. The protagonist uses his powers to figure out who the attacker is and realizes it's the god who was present at the auction. He also understands that the wealthy man who he outwitted earlier sent the masked man to kill him, but the god doesn't want to kill him and says stay away from the trading places these days or your life will be in danger. Then he leaves. The next day, his friend goes to see the businessman and is surprised that the protagonist didn't come with him. They come across an expensive stone and believe there might be an emerald inside. They decide to buy it, and when they break it open, they see a white stone. They break it again but it remains the same. They then decide to call the protagonist for help. The protagonist arrives at the location with his face covered to avoid being recognized. He uses his ability and realizes the color stones won't appear unless heat is applied. He tells them to use something hot and explains how to break it. When they follow his instructions, they finally see the green color of the stone. His friend and the businessman are thrilled, happy that their money wasn't wasted after all. The three of them agreed to visit another trading place. The protagonist uses his ability to find a rare stone and writes down everything important in his notebook. However, the wealthy man sees him through the cameras and becomes suspicious. Realizing the protagonist is not an ordinary person, he orders his guards to steal the notebook from him. The guards catch up to the protagonist as he returns to the hotel, intending to take the notebook from him. But a female officer arrives just in time and fights the guards. The protagonist tries to help, but the guards knock him out, leaving him unconscious. We see that the female officer is a skilled fighter and manages to defend herself. The guards are surprised by her abilities and flee the scene in fear. She picks up the protagonist and brings him to his room, laying him down on his bed. We see her gazing at him intensely and it becomes clear that she has feelings for him. Suddenly she sees him about to fall off the bed and rushes to catch him, but they both tumble to the ground. At that moment, his friend walks in and misunderstands the situation, then leaves without saying anything. The next day, the protagonist wakes up with no memory of what happened. His friend explains that the female officer saved him and brought him back to the hotel. The protagonist decides to invite the female officer and his friend for a meal to thank her for saving him. During the meal, the officer explains that the guard who attacked him was once a special forces officer, but one of his friends fell seriously ill, which forced him to leave the army. He had to find a high-paying job to afford his friend's treatment and to support his family. The wealthy man took advantage of this situation, manipulating him to do his bidding. She warns the protagonist to be cautious, saying the guard won't stop until he gets what he wants. The next day, the guard takes advantage of the protagonist being busy and steals the notebook. However, the protagonist notices everything. When the guard opens the notebook, he is shocked to find a message from the protagonist. It reads, "I know about your friend's illness. Meet me in front of the hotel." The guard delivers the notebook to the wealthy man, but the man refuses to pay him any money, saying, "I wanted you to kill the protagonist, but you didn't. You don't owe me anything." The guard then meets with the protagonist, who thanks him for not killing him. The offers to pay for his friend's hospital expenses. The guard is surprised and grateful. Together, they devise a plan to expose the wealthy man's crimes. The next day, the big auction is set to take place. However, the protagonist wakes up feeling sick, his eyes hurting. Despite his condition, he decides to attend the auction. His friend and the guard begin executing their plan. They manage to steal the key to the wealthy man's room without him noticing. They open his laptop. At this point, the wealthy man is very confident, because he believes he has bought all the rare stones mentioned in the protagonist's notebook. However, the protagonist's friend manages to change the names in the notes. The wealthy man starts to feel like something is wrong and rushes to his room, but he doesn't see anyone there because they've hidden themselves. Meanwhile, the businessman successfully purchases the rare stones the protagonist had noted. The protagonist uses his golden eyes and discovers that one of the stones contains rare gold. He decides to break it in front of everyone. When they break the stone, they discover red gold inside. Everyone is astonished because it's something incredibly rare that people have been searching for years. If a necklace were made from this red gold, it would sell for an enormous amount of money. Businessmen and wealthy individuals offer to buy it, and the bids reach 40 million. However, the wealthy man offers 70 million. The protagonist declines, and instead sells the stone to a woman who owns a prestigious jewelry shop. Just then the female arrives and arrests the wealthy man, accusing him of fraud. During the auction, the protagonist had informed the police about the scam. The man is taken to the station for investigation. The protagonist and his friends celebrate selling the stone for 80 million. The guard thanks the protagonist for paying for his friend's hospital expenses. The businessman then opens a shop for the protagonist, so his name becomes recognized everywhere. They enjoy some great moments together, and later the protagonist visits the guard and asks him to work for him. As his personal protector, the guard agrees. Later the protagonist receives a call from the jewelry store owner asking to meet. We then see that the guard has feelings for this woman. He agrees to go with her, and they all get into the protagonist's car, himself, the guard and his friend. However, they soon realize that the car's brakes aren't working. Suddenly a large fast-moving vehicle comes toward them. They try to swerve, but they get into an accident. The protagonist wakes up and calls an ambulance. They arrive at the hospital, but fortunately his injuries aren't severe. However, he's worried about the woman. A nurse informs him that she's in the VIP section because she comes from a wealthy family. The protagonist goes to check on her and finds her father sitting by her side. Her father thanks him for selling his daughter the rare stone, then leaves. We then see that the protagonist brought her a gift. However, when he enters the room, he notices she has already received many gifts. Feeling a little embarrassed, he hands over his gift. She graciously accepts it, telling him it's the best gift she's received. After that, he becomes very happy with what she said to him. Then we see that the two of them liked each other. Then the hero returns to the store and the guards say, "We think the man who owned the money wanted to kill you for revenge." Then a female officer arrives and tells them that the wealthy man has been released from prison with no evidence against him because his assistant took the blame for the crime. The next day, the hero meets the woman's father who had the money and is surprised when the father wants him to be his business advisor. The father also offers him a percentage of every deal he makes. The hero agrees because he wants to learn more about rare types of gold. Then the woman who owned the money accompanies the hero and buys him a new suit. She becomes smitten by his good looks. They end up going to a restaurant together, and at that moment the female officer sees them and feels jealous because she is in love with her. But he remains oblivious to her feelings. She sits nearby and the hero notices that she is not acting like herself. He finds out that she has been suspended from her job and is shocked. The hero then offers her the position of his personal bodyguard until she gets reinstated. The officer is thrilled because this means she can stay close to him all the time, and she accepts the offer. The next day, they travel to Russia to attend a sales exhibition. The hero's friend asks the female officer to accompany him as he buys a few small things. She agrees to go with him and they enter a store that sells gold, only to find that robbers are inside planning a heist. The robbers are armed and they take everyone in the store hostage. The hero's friend pretends to be sick, and as one of the robbers approaches him, the officer suddenly attacks and manages to beat him and take his gun. She then threatens the other robbers to drop their weapons. The store owner thanks them and offers them a reward, but they decline and leave the store as they are walking through the city. They notice the other gang members who want to take revenge on the officer for what she did. The officer pretends to have a gun in her pocket and threatens them. She and the hero's friend run away, but as they get tired from running, the gang surrounds them ready to attack. Suddenly a car pulls up and the woman who owned the money arrives with her assistant. The assistant offers the gang money, saying these people are our guests and asks them to forgive what happened. The officer becomes angry about the situation and takes the hero's friend. Leaving the scene, when she returns to the hotel, she tells the hero everything that happened, warning him to be careful of the woman with the money because she might be using him and working with the gang. However, the hero dismisses her concerns, saying, "I think you're just jealous because she's a beautiful woman and wealthy." The officer gets upset and storms off to her room. The next day, they attend a masked ball and we see that this is the first time the officer has attended such an event. Dressed in beautiful clothes, she feels uncomfortable. Can't walk in her shoes, so she takes them off. The hero notices her and is impressed by her beauty. He asks her to dance and she is surprised and embarrassed by his request. But he gently takes her hand and they start dancing together. We see that they make a beautiful couple. The hero's friend starts recording a video of them and when they notice, they stop dancing. Feeling shy, they leave the ball and go to a casino. At the casino, the hero sees someone playing cards and uses his abilities to discover that there is cheating. He embarrasses the cheater in front of everyone and the cheater gets angry and starts a fight. The next day a murder takes place at the hotel and we see that the man who was killed is the same man who played cards with the hero. The weapon used to kill him is found in the hero's room and he is accused of the murder. The hero sees the weapon and uses his special ability, stating that the knife cut the hand of the killer, but no one believes him. The hotel management holds him until the police arrive to investigate. The hero notices that the manager is wearing gloves, and he suspects that the manager is hiding an injury. Meanwhile, the female officer tries to gather evidence to prove the hero's innocence. The woman with the money arrives and offers to help, but the officer is still suspicious. However, the hero's friend insists that they need her help to clear his name, so they agree to work together. They plan to enter the security room to check the surveillance footage. Disguised as hotel staff, they manage to sneak into the room, knock out guards and tie them up. When they check the cameras, they see the manager entering the hero's room and they become suspicious of him. The woman with the money calls the manager to lure him away from the hero's room. When she meets the manager, she notices an injury on his hand and he claims he cut himself while eating fruit at the same time. The officer enters the hero's room to help him escape, but the manager realizes something is wrong and rushes back to the room. He finds the hero trying to escape and is confronted by the hero him until he confesses to killing the man. The whole confession is recorded as evidence. The officer then arrives and hits the manager to protect the hero. The police arrived shortly after and arrest the manager, clearing the hero of any wrongdoing. The next day, the hero accompanies the woman with the money to a marketplace. He sees a 129-carat gemstone and uses his ability to discover that a red emerald zamrud is inside the stone. He informs the woman's father so that he can purchase it, though the father hesitates at first. However, trusting the hero, he buys the gemstone, and in front of everyone, the stone is cracked open, revealing a red emerald inside. Everyone is amazed because its value exceeds $100 million, and if it's turned into a necklace, its worth would be even higher. Among the crowd is a businesswoman who approaches the hero, telling him about her large collection of rare gemstones and complimenting his skills. She offers him a deal, promising that he will benefit because she has access to every type of gemstone. The hero agrees to work with her. He, his friend, and the female officer go with the businesswoman to one of her mining sites. There, the hero uses his ability to locate several red emeralds hidden within the ground. He informs the businesswoman who was planning to sell the land because they hadn't found anything valuable in a long time. The hero tells her to hold off because she will definitely find many valuable stones soon. He shares a plan with her for extracting gemstones and she realizes that someone was trying to trick her into selling the land. She decides to follow the hero's advice and promises him 50% of the profits if his plan succeeds. However, a rival businessman discovers their plan and kidnaps the businesswoman's daughter. He calls her and says if you don't sign over the land, you will never see your daughter again. Fearing for her daughter's safety, she agrees to the deal. But the hero decides to help her and comes up with a plan to rescue her daughter. He tells her, meet with a man who wants to buy your land and I will rescue your daughter. The hero and the female officer meet and go to a nightclub owned by the kidnapper. The hero begins playing cards and wins against everyone using his special ability. As people start gathering around him, the female officer takes advantage of the situation by disguising herself as one of the staff. She sneaks into the room where the kidnapped girl is being held and successfully knocks out the guards rescuing the girl. She dresses the girl in a different outfit to prevent her from being recognized, and they head down to where the crowd is gathered. At the same time, the club's manager realizes that the woman who owns the land is up to something and tries to delay her. He orders that all doors be locked and no one allowed to leave. However, the landowner's assistant threatens to detonate an explosive she has, forcing them to stand down. The female officer starts fighting the guards and manages to defeat most of them. The landowner escapes outside where the hero's friend is waiting for her and they flee in a car. The hero also grabs the girl and follows in his own car, but the criminals chase after them in other vehicles, shooting at them. Although the hero manages to escape, he is injured in the leg. He urges the girl to leave him and return to her mother, while he stays behind to hold off the criminals. She reluctantly agrees and goes home to inform her mother about what happened to the hero. Meanwhile, the hero's friend and some guards want to rescue him, but the landowner stops them, locking them in a room to keep safe. They refuse to stay put, however, and fight their way out, eventually escaping. The girl who was rescued gives them weapons to help them rescue the hero. At the same time, the female officer regains consciousness and tracks down the hero, but his eyes are in severe pain and he passes out. She carries him to safety and nurses him back to health, revealing that she has feelings for him. While tending to him, she overhears two criminals talking about the hero and realizes they are in danger. She wakes him up and helps him escape the area. As they try to flee, 3 villagers attempt to stop them, but the female officer engages them in combat, easily overpowering them. She takes the hero into the forest to hide, but the criminals are hot on their trail. The hero continues to feel intense pain in his eyes, so the officer hides him among the trees to protect him. She urges him not to come out and then sets a trap for the criminals. She ambushes them and begins taking them down one by one, breaking their bones and disabling many of them. The criminals are shocked by her strength, but they keep coming because of their large numbers. Eventually, the leader of the criminals points a gun at her and demands that she reveal the hero's location. She refuses and he angrily strikes her on the head, knocking her to the ground. The hero, witnessing this, is in agony but feels powerless to help. The criminals capture the officer and plan to kill her if the hero does not show himself. Knowing that he will never abandon her, the hero devises a plan to her and disguises himself to infiltrate the criminals' hideout. He and his friend, disguised as different people, manage to reach the place where the criminals are holding the officer. The hero's friend creates a diversion by attacking the guards, allowing the hero to defeat many of them and escape. The criminals give chase, but the hero and his friend manage to stay one step ahead. At that moment, the hero takes advantage of the opportunity and enters the location where he sees 3 guards using his powers. He senses where they are coming from and successfully dodges them, defeating them. He then makes his way inside to rescue the female officer so they can escape. However, the criminals capture the guards and threaten the hero, telling him to surrender or they will kill all of his friends. The hero, with no other option, agrees to their demand and surrenders himself. He is brought before the gang leader and the hero pleads with him to let his friends go, promising that he will do whatever the leader wants. The gang leader, however, decides to play a deadly game. He loads a bullet into a gun and says each of you will take a turn pulling the trigger. Whoever dies, it was meant to be. The female officer takes the gun and pulls the trigger, but there's no bullet. Then the hero takes the gun, feeling like he might have to say goodbye to his friends for good. He prepares to pull the trigger, but just in time the wealthy woman and the police arrive, saving them. The hero collapses from exhaustion. He is taken to the hospital and when he wakes up he sees wealthy woman sitting next to him. He thanks her for saving him. She leaves the room to let him rest and soon after his friend comes in to check on him. The hero asks about the female officer and how she is doing. The female officer overhears this and realizes that the hero cares about her. She goes to her room, expecting him to come check on her. Later, the hero goes to see her and remembers how she risked her life to save him. He thanks her for saving him and she thanks him for not abandoning her afterward. The hero turns to the market and the wealthy woman shows up again asking how he's feeling. As they are walking through the market, the hero sees a wooden statue. Using his powers, he senses something inside and decides to buy it. The wealthy woman is surprised that he would buy something so worthless. When the hero gets home, he breaks open the statue and finds an old map inside. The map points to treasure hidden in the mountains. He shows the map to the guards and says this is a map of the Japanese military they stole a lot of money during the war and no one knows where they hid it. But this map shows where the treasure is located. He warns them that the path to the treasure is dangerous. The hero decides to go after the treasure and the guards agree to go with him. However, one condition is set. They must follow the lead of the head guard who says, "I used to be a special forces officer, so I know every dangerous spot on the way." Their journey begins as they pass through the forest and reach an open field. Suddenly the hero feels that he has stepped on something using his powers. He realizes that he has stepped on a landmine left from the war. The head guard rushes over and tells him not to move, warning that any movement could trigger an explosion. The guard calls the female officer asking for something heavy to replace the hero's weight on the mine so they can rescue him. Without hesitation, the female officer steps onto the mine in place of the hero to save him. Everyone is shocked by her bravery. The hero, surprised, asks, "Why did you do that?" Streaming down her face, she confesses, "Because I love you. Now please get away before the mine explodes." The hero refuses to leave her, but the head guard insists, saying, "I will rescue her. You go." The hero's friend forcibly pulls him away from the danger while the female officer cries, feeling that her death is near. Here is the end of Season 1. What do you think about this drama? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more gripping movie recaps. See you next time.